Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome to another episode of Wednesday's Heavy Metallurgy Album Club. I'm joined once again by my wonderful hosts, Jim from Eihwaz Recordings and Kellen from Killing for Company. Check out both of these guys' channels and or organizations after you watch the show with us. Links in the description. But gentlemen, other than Jim sitting in the middle of a hurricane right now, how's everybody doing?
Doing good.
Doing good. I just hear the roar outside the window, and I'm just going to focus on the conversation and not think about it.
Yeah. Well, we know if you blank out that you've lost power, we will forge on without you.
Please do.
So, Jim, you picked a pretty dense, awesome album, Ruins of Beverast, Blood Vaults, The Blazing Gospel of Henrich Kramer. What was the impetus for that?
It's actually something that I still, even though it's 9 years old now, I still pull out pretty often. I'm just a huge fan of Ruins of Beverast. I like everything they've done. It's just one of those very few bands that, though I may not like this or that album as much as the other kind of thing or whatever, I can listen to all of Alexander's output. I just think that what he does is very unique. It combines a lot of styles that I really like. And, I guess the number one reason why I wanted to listen to it, is that, or talk about it, was because, we're kind of getting in that era or time of year where, we like the creepy, we like the scary, fall is here, Halloween's around the corner. And I think that, Ruins of Beverast is one of those few bands that truly is, if you are listening to this music with your headphones on, it's fucking scary for real. You know what I mean? Like the sounds to me are very like unsettling, but not in a way where it's not like they're trying to, like, it truly is like there's something super dark about this music that always draws me back to it, and I really love it. So I just wanted to get the opportunity to discuss it with people like yourselves that can really understand, the intensity of this kind of sound.
Okay. Well, we'll get into it here with a little bit of super brief history. The Ruins of Beverast is a Black and Doom project formed by Alexander von Meelenwald in 2003. He came from the German band Nagelfar with an E. Super great band. In a lot of ways, sounds a lot like Ruins of Beverast. Just a little bit faster, maybe a little more. I don't know. It's just like maybe a faster Ruins of Beverast. It's very similar. He's got a very distinct writing style. Anyway, although Alexander uses sessions musicians live, he continues to perform all instruments and vocals on the band's studio material. The Ruins of Beverast has released 6 full-length albums to date, and we're talking about Blood Vaults, The Blazing Gospel of Henrich Kramer. This came out in 2013. And before we get into it as well, I tried reading up a bit about this Henrich Kramer guy, a little bit. I was going to write down a whole bunch of stuff, but I just wanted to give an overview. He was a prior, a pastor or whatever, and he was given Inquisitor Master title in 1487 by the Catholic Church. Wait a minute. Yeah. He also was, since he was kind of in charge of investigating supernatural and witches activities, he got involved in prosecuting and interviewing these people before prosecution, and was getting some praise for it and some opposition for it, and it inspired him to write the book Malleus Maleficarum, which translates loosely as The Hammer of Witches. The Catholic Church decided that the book was a little too extreme in its ways of determining it was a witch and couldn't get behind it, but other people in the era gave it a thumbs up, and he got a little bit of power over it, and there's a whole bunch of stuff, but that's the overview. He wrote the Malleus Maleficarum, and it was widely used in the prosecution and determining of who was a witch or not during the whole the witch burning era of the history of our history. But yeah, so this album is very much written around that whole theme. It's a concept album. And first impressions, Jim already kind of talked a bit about it, so we're going to jump into Kellen. What was your first impression when you heard this record?
My first impression was it seemed like, so back in 2013, like it was building off of what Foulest Seaman and Sheltered Elite sort of got going. It felt like a larger, bigger, in particular, doomier record to me, just the scale of it. But I also want to kind of point out the pacing of it's a little bit different. So,
written by Alan Coulson, by the way. He is the author of that one.
Hammer and Dolphin.
Yes.
Yeah, but I guess just my overall impressions, it's a little bit of a doomier record, but a logical sort of progression for what Foulest Seaman was.
How about you, Jim?
Just first impressions, like, or
yep, first impressions.
Oh man, it was instant. You know, I had heard, you know, Unlock the Shrine, and you know, I liked it, but you know, the production was it was really hard to kind of make out what was going on. You know, it's real, it's, you know, it's just kind of underproduced, whether that was on purpose or not, or just kind of where he was, you know, career wise, and you know, didn't have the money. I don't know, but it was really hard to. I knew there was awesomeness there, and I would hear like little glimpses of it, but it was so buried. Like the mix had so much going on. It was hard for me to separate everything, but I was still super intrigued by the music. I knew there was just like, again, that evil darkness, this vibe just like really pulled me in, and I kept, you know, going back to it. And you know, I heard you know, Foulest Seaman. I was like, okay, this is awesome, you know, and you know, that was a huge step in the right direction for me. And but you know, when I saw, you know, what really brought me in was when I saw the cover of this, like I knew something was going to be great. I was like, hey man, I love the cover. It's great painting. It's horrifying. You know, the blood vaults. You know, the blazing gospels of Henrich Kramer. Like everything about it. The title. I was like, this looks epic in the way you're, you know, digging yourself a grave that goes all the way to hell. Yeah, I mean, like I was like, that kind of like depth was there, and I couldn't wait to hear it. And actually, the person I think I heard it first from, Marty, was Jake. I think Jake brought it over to my house one night.
Yeah.
And when as soon as he put it on, you know, and you know, Alexander's doing that crazy, you know, pitch transposed voice. You know, he's like quoting Latin and going crazy, you know, and an apologia, man. You know, I was just like, fuck, I love this, man. And we listened like it's all coming back to me now. We listened like the whole record in that metal room that I had in Traverse City. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I'm going to get this like now, like, you know, it was that kind of like, you know, I mean, so many of the bands that we love in metal, like, you know, go for, you know, darkness and scary. And I think most of them, you know, I enjoy that vibe, but I can, you know, switch it off and not think about it. But whenever I listen to Ruins of Beverast, you know, especially from this album forward, like I can't, well, I'd say Foulest Seaman forward, I can't walk away from it after listening to it and not still be thinking about it. It still has its claws in my mind. And so it was like love at first listen for this record. It was something that I was looking for, like something that was truly like creepy and terrifying, but not in that sort of like, you know, absurd kind of way that the metal can be sometimes. Like it was seriously like dark, like, you know, it affected me, you know what I mean? And I wanted that feeling to come back again and again. So, and what was cool about it was, Jay knew I loved it so much, he just gave it to me, man. Like this copy of mine, I didn't buy it. Jake just gave it to me, dude. You know, and I was just stunned, dude. It was like the craziest thing, you know. But anyway, that's the story. So so it means a lot to me for many different reasons. So
Oh, for me, I mean, I start off with Nagelfar, their first album. I followed this guy through all that stuff, and then through the birth of Ruins of Beverast. Unlock the Shrines is it's faster, but still there's a lot of twisted elements to it. Follow Seaman, the Tortured Elite, Rain Upon the Impure, all that stuff is really well composed and excellent, has his signature tone. But when I heard this record, it took all of that stuff he's been building towards, and it made it way more cerebral. It's a very cerebral album. And whether you're listening to it on headphones or loud on a stereo sitting in front of it, it's one of those things where you're not on your phone. You're just kind of sitting there staring off into space, and just kind of being tormented by these waves of very dark. I mean, from the synth tones, to the layering of choirs and all this, it's very sinister. It's a very sinister album. It's a very, I mean, they're calling this Black and Doom. I mean, this is at the pinnacle of that for me. It sets a precedent. TJ, he's in the chat. He was talking how it, reminded him in spots of, disembowelment, like some of the cleaner guitar tones. I can maybe get that, but it's so minor. It's so much his own sound. He really cultivated it to something fantastic on this record. And I don't think he's been as good as this record since. I mean, I like the stuff he's put out. Not a big fan of the newest one, but I mean, he's got his own sound and he's continuing to cultivate it. But, Blood Vaults is a definite milestone in his catalog so far. Did you talk about already, Kellen? Did I skip you? Yes. No. Did you say so?
Yeah,
okay.
I got a chance to chime in.
Well, Kellen had a little side note he put up. I did not copy it. You have it available there, Kellen?
Yeah, I got it here. So one of the defining characteristics for many, if not most, metal bands in the 20th century was their ability to express their individuality within the confines of a collective, be it geographic, thematic, or historical. So like the new wave of British heavy metal, Swedish death metal, first wave black metal, all these sort of collectives. While the Ruins of Beverast is truly creative and unique force to be reckoned with, who else in the 21st century do you see as peers?
Go ahead, Jim.
This is a very, very difficult one because I really don't know anyone that sounds anything like Ruins of Beverast. It's one of the reasons I love them so much, is because I think it's so unique. The only thing that when I can kind of think of for this album, and I only mean like the faster riffs, but they remind me a little of Necros Christos on the fast.
Yeah, that's a good call.
Riffs, Doom of the Occult and Tried Impurity Rites. I can hear those kinds of riffs there, but only on the fast riffs and some of the doomier style riffs. But in terms of like his orchestration choices, which a lot of creepy organs, sung female vocals, choir vocals, that kinds of things. Necros Christos does a lot of crazy, cool orchestration as well, but theirs I feel is like more of an organic sort of an approach to their additional instrumentation, where Ruins I feel is more of an electronic and an industrial approach with organic elements in terms of the vocalizations, thrown in there. So that's the only band that I can really think of, that kind of when I listen to this, I'm like, I'm going to listen to Doom of the Occult next, or Trying Impurity Rites. Having said that, yes, the new album, the Thule Grimoires, there's definitely a typo influence in there. I don't mind it. I love typo negatives. I think it's great. Tony's.
Marty's good. Like, just keep it out of Ruins of Beverast. I mean, right. I don't think it has a place. I don't think it has a place in this dense.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely, I think, lightens the mood a little bit. So I'm kind of hoping he goes back dark again and kind of goes, down the abyss on his next album. But aside, Thule Grimoires aside, I kind of think they're peerless, because I don't know of anyone that they remind me of except for Necros Christos, which, you know, they're broke up now, right? They're not, are they broke up?
Yeah, they
Yeah,
got
yeah.
a different band, I think, or something going on. I
Okay.
don't know. I didn't follow them. They put out one truly amazing album, and the stuff that came after it was a little lesser, in my opinion. Still good, but just not
Yeah,
as
Doom and the Occult's not as good as Trying Impurity Rites, but I
no.
still really like it, though. I
Yeah,
still
that's
think
good.
it's good.
Necromantic Nun.
Yeah.
Well, for me, I mean, peers. Oh, you know, you talk about geographical. You know, there's like a sonic characteristic that goes, and you can tell a Norwegian band. Typically, you can tell a Swedish band. That type of stuff. But you know, Runes of Beverast doesn't even sound German. And peers, I mean, Necros Christos, I mean, you saved me there. I never would have thought of them, but that's perfect. They're not as dense, but they still have they you know, their formative years are very heavy with, you know, religious layering and, you know, symbolism and all that stuff, and the lower vocal style. There's a lot of similarities between those two bands for sure. I think Runes of Beverast did it a little bit better. They took it in a much darker place. But what about you, Kellen? I mean, I don't know where to go with this question. It's a good one. I don't keep up with new stuff as much as I should. I mean, what, Imperial Triumphant? I mean, I don't know.
I don't think they do, especially to this level of complexity.
Yeah.
Like, maybe if you look at the Ruins of Beverast early albums, it may be easier to draw comparisons. But once they sort of make the turn with Phallosemen and the Sheltered Elite into this record, there's so much to enjoy. The complexity, the layering, sort of the textural aspects to this record, all the different elements. Like, it is a very unique band. Yeah, and I don't think Leviathan sounds like Ruins of Beverast, in my opinion. But I guess the kind of point I was going for is, like, I think it's harder now, you know, if your band is taking chances, and especially within extreme metal, looking to sort of explore new territory. What Ruins of Beverast, in my opinion, does incredibly well is, instead of like pushing boundaries into like a new genre within, like, let's say black metal or doom metal, I don't think it's necessarily they're going beyond within that individual style. It's the bridging. They, unlike any other band, have found a way, like whatever sonic gulf existed between those genres, no other band is able to articulate them simultaneously and seamlessly like Ruins of Beverast does.
And it kind of strikes me listening to it. It seems like it's not something forced. It's just part of him. It's just a subconscious way of the way he writes.
Right.
You know, some bands that try to cross that bridge and incorporate other things, it sounds forced sometimes. I mean, like, people would disagree with me on this, but Enslaved's Monumentation, that album, when that came out, was people were just shitting their pants. Oh, this is amazing prog influence. And, you know, and I listened to that record and it sounded like Enslaved trying to work prog in, and it just seemed foreign at that point. I knew it was a sign that they would eventually get it, which they did. They eventually got it figured out. But that album, I mean, everybody praised it as so brave and, you know, perfect. And I listened to it. It just sounded like a band trying too hard. I don't get that impression with this. And I did not mean to interrupt you. It just popped into my head. Sorry.
But let's even take a different German band. So take a band like Bethlehem, right? Like,
yeah,
they're an amazing band that kind of blend to some degree black metal and doom metal. But like,
and then went industrial for a minute.
I think there's so much going on Blood Vaults.
Yeah.
All the different like choral arrangements, you tie in the conceptual nature of it. The track listing, actually, I think mirrors parts of Malleus Maleficarum in terms of how it organizes the songs and groupings on the LPs.
Yeah.
Like, it's just all of those factors, I think, make up an incredibly unique identity within the band. And I guess to take this conversation somewhere else is, I think it is increasingly more difficult for a band to sort of break into new territory and navigate parts of extreme metal at the same time, while being so unique, sort of limit the opportunity for them to be seen as like part of a peer group, right?
Mhm.
Whereas like parts of the 90s, you had extreme metal bands that were able to still make for new steps within genres, but they were able to also be identified as individuals. So like if you take Norwegian black metal, for example, you know, Gorgoroth doesn't sound like, you know, Mayhem, doesn't sound like Emperor, whatever. You can go on and on. There's enough individuality within those bands, but there's still room for a group of, you know, bands to come together and be understood as a sort of a collective scene. I think it's harder to do that now. I think so much of that has been established. It's far more difficult for bands to sort of create peer groups within a sound. So I was just interested to get your read on that and see what your thoughts were.
Well, in a band too, like, you know, Runes of Beverast, they're maybe a bit peerless. They've kind of forged, you know, with very subconsciously forged into this realm, that, like, you know, Alan said, this album could fit on the black metal shelf, the death metal shelf, or the doom metal shelf. But when I sit down, because Doom, I am not a guy that sits down and wants to listen to Doom. Very rarely. I like it, but I don't take this as a Doom record. It's just so cerebral. I sit down and you kind of become a part of it. You're kind of pulled along for the ride into this, you know, this journey it's fucked up. There's shit hiding around every corner. You just kind of want to see where it goes. And fuck, I don't know where I was going. But yeah, peerless. I just don't think of many bands that sound like this. I mean, even the Nagelfar stuff. You know, someone mentioned their Nagelfar were a bit more folky. Yeah, they were at times, but there was just, you know, especially when they kicked into the speed on like that second album, just that raw bass tone, and the speed just seems so unhinged and almost off the rails and frantic. And even then, Alexander was so good at sculpting these moods, taking the listener along, you know, whether he was blasting or playing slower parts, you were along for the ride, and nothing sounded out of place. And it's just this advanced level of songwriting that really isn't touched on much in the metal scene, really. I mean, it's a lot of guys playing riffs and, you know, doing their best to write good songs, but this is a whole nother level of orchestration. This whole piece, this whole Blood Vaults it seems very it's like an orchestra. And I guess we're skating into the discuss the musicality and composition. I'll start off with that. I listened to it. I haven't listened to it in a while, and I put it on this weekend. And I was a little surprised, as you know, listening to it with clean, fresh ears, how simplistic the foundation of it is, meaning the music, the riffs. The riffs themselves are dark. They're very low tuned, very heavy and sinister sounding, but they're very simple riffs. I mean, I could pick up my guitar. A lot of them are riffs that are written on one string, or, you know, maybe not a lot of chords, or just the lines that he wrote for the foundation are very simplistic, and it allowed him to, and that makes all the stuff he loaded on top of it even more amazing. And like, it didn't seem like there was a lot of jamming on here. I really think he sat down and plotted a lot of this stuff out and actually kind of wrote it like a symphony, this fucking insane symphony thing going on. And that attention to detail from start to finish. And then of course you go through, I'm assuming the Latin stuff that's put in there is excerpts from, you know, Malleus Maleficarum Karma. I'm assuming, I don't know. I read the lyrics today. It's just, I mean, a sonic grimoire, you know, retelling what was going on in that book and the mental state of the writer. I think it's pretty much a genius record. And I feel bad for guys like this that write something so poignant, so advanced, and then continue to keep going. Like the album after this is good, but it's not as good as this. Then the newest album, yeah, it's good, but it's not as good as this. So, I mean, something like this is to be praised, but it's kind of a curse too. I mean, where do you go from here? What do you think, Jim? We're talking about musicality and composition.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I love Exuvia. I love Tuli Grimoires, but yeah, Blood Vaults is definitely on another level. And in fact, when I first heard Exuvia, I was a little disappointed. I felt like it was way stripped down compared to like the dark, apocryphal epicness of this album. You know what I mean? I felt like it just kind of, so I had to approach it later. I got into Exuvia later. I had to kind of like get over that and kind of like approach Exuvia like its own thing, like without being in the shadow of Blood Vaults. But in terms of Blood Vaults itself, in terms of composition, everything like that, yeah, I would say that the riffs are deceptively simple. They if you take them one like piece of them at a time, they are. But you know, Alexander's got a background as a drummer, man. He doesn't play them in 4/4. He'll do 5 bars instead of 4. He'll do 7 bars instead of 6. Like, he changes it up. If you listen to like how he stitches everything together, like it's not Meshuggah here. These are very subtle, like time signature shifts, just where he's playing measures in odd numbers, but it's just enough to like give those simple riffs like a little bit more color, a little bit more intrigue, and gives you something else to listen for on repeat spins. You're like, wait a minute, oh, he's not going into that. He's not going to that next riff. I think he was, or he's going to do a slightly different key change right there. The riff is similar, but he's going up a few frets. And if you play any sort of music at all, you kind of see like he's got this bass rhythmic like build in him as a drummer that comes through in his riff writing. There's like and the tribal moments, the bouncing on the toms with like the chants going on and stuff like that. You can hear like he's pulling up that ancient sort of like banging on dead skin pulled over drums. He's bringing that up to the modern era, and and affixing a guitar on top of it, and then from there, to your point, Marty, orchestrating this like this maniacal, like malevolent, I don't even know what to call it really. It's just large and deep, and I every time I listen to this record, I hear something I didn't hear before. And
the thing of it is, talking about, not to cut you off, but the all that shit he adds over the top. But when I talk about orchestration, I mean, as a songwriter, you'll write a chunk of music and like, oh, this needs something over there. I got to throw something over the top of this. This doesn't seem like that. It doesn't sound like he's just filling in holes just to be artsy. It seems like it all has a purpose and a place and all premeditated. But anyway, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I completely agree with you. Everything is thought out. Whether you're listening to Foul Seaman or Unlock the Shrine or Rain Upon the Impure, all of those records, I feel like there's intent there. Everything matters to Alexander. Every lyric, every bass line, every beat that's chosen, every key synth choice or a vocalization choice, style of vocalization, he really has thought it out. Even saying like, hey, the topic of my album is going to be this like German inquisitor who basically wrote the book for the witch trials that came a couple hundred years later, where thousands of people worldwide were tortured and killed. I mean, I'm going to do that. You know what I mean? And I'm going to do that with a musical backing that is so convincing, when the listener is done with it, if he gets it or she gets it or they get it, it will haunt them afterward, and I don't think you can do that. This is not like, to your point, Marty, 4 guys in a room, in a practice room. You like that riff? You like that riff? Let's put them together, see what happens. This is not that. This is not that person. This is a guy alone in a room, taking his own insanity and putting it to record, and I love that. And it's cool. Alan had that comment. I think I missed it a minute ago, but he said, "Do one-man projects have trouble forming peer groups, given that they're almost by definition?" Yeah, there it is, right there. I'm going to read it for you. So, I think you're right. I think that they do, because and so people like Alexander, they hire people to go to do the shows with him, but he's not ever going to let anyone else be a band member in there, because this is his vision that he's driven to express. He's driven to get it out. He has to do it, and thank God for it, because not every man band is as successful as Ruins of Beverast, but for people that are on his level of creativity, it's a gift to people that enjoy extreme music like ourselves, because we finally hear something that isn't boilerplate and that we have trouble defining, and it's so hard to find that, you know what I mean? And that's why 9 years later, I'm still talking about this record,
Right on. Kellen, I've been forgetting to highlight us. Sorry. Just so listening to the conversation. Kellen, there you are.
Yeah.
Your thoughts on the musicality and composition of the album?
I think if like the dynamic part of the record, given like the drum piece, if that had been any more complex, or even the guitar lines had been more complex dynamically, it'd have been overkill.
Yeah,
like
too much.
So much of the record that is, I mean, I know that you've talked a lot about how this is sort of like a haunting, scary. Like, I revel in this, in the sense that like every moment of this record, there's so much to take in and enjoy. And I know a lot of the comments have been like they can't latch on to a lot of this. I understand that, in the sense that if you're looking for like something to really sink your teeth into and consistently return to, everything is just kind of layered upon layered upon layer. Like, that's what I'm enjoying about it, as opposed to like having a well-structured sort of dynamic, direction. I absolutely like, from the holistic side of things, to have a concept, to have an uncompromising sense of vision, to continually add elements on top of one another that make this record incredibly creative. The composition's amazing. And to your point, Marty, about like the records that followed, it may be at the high point in the catalog. Like, he may have explored to some degree the sort of heart of his sound. And this may be like kind of an apex where everything that follows, he's going to have to sort of, take it in a different direction that he may not have a as well defined sort of understanding of what it is. I think I kind of got that on Exuvia, and he's taking more chances on Grimoire, but masterclass composition and musicality, brilliant songwriter, incredible vision in terms of what you can do with an extreme metal record, that no one else is touching, and there's no real guidance for either. So amazing.
And what an incredible concept he chose for this. I mean, does it fit? It couldn't have fit the style of music he's playing more perfectly. It's just, it was meant to be. Production, Jim.
I wouldn't change a thing about it, and I know you hear me say that on the show a lot. And I'm definitely not one of those. That I'm like Marty. I don't like remasters and stuff like that. I think that albums capture a moment of time, even if they're shittily recorded. Even like Unlock the Shrine is like hard it was for me to piece everything out. Like, I still wouldn't want Alexander to redo it because now I'm just kind of embraced it the way it is. But having said that, like this album for me is a huge progression in his capabilities within the studio, and executing his vision. And so I think it was, everything hits on the right cylinders for me. Like, I love the drum production. It's up front, but it's not like pounding you with highs and too many cymbals or clicky drums, like clicky bass drums. Like, everything is kind of low and purposeful. I love the down-tuned guitars and the way that, even though they're up front, there's a balance between the guitars and the orchestration and the vocals. The vocals are overlaying the top always, but because they're so interesting in Ruins of Beverast, that doesn't bother me. Being a guitar player, I typically like guitars to be way up front, even over the vocals. But in this case, not. Like, the vocal choices that Alexander does on this, especially when he's doing that super creep-tastic voice, like, make my skin crawl in the best way as a extreme metal fan. Like, I like that. I remember the first time I spun this really loud, and my wife was in the next room, and he again, Apologia starts off, he's like barking the Latin, and Jess is like, oh my God, what is that? You know? And I knew, I was like, yes, you know, I freaked out my wife, because typically, like, I can play extreme metal just when you're out there. It doesn't bother her, but yeah, something about, you know, Alexander's voice on this like really just got to her. And and you know, I got it in the way that, like, you know, you're not a fan, but you still felt something, you know. And you know, I definitely feel something from this, and you know, vocally, and I love the riffs, you know. Let's see which guy on there was. Yeah, DG Charles was talking about it. You say you get unintentional stank face when listening to these riffs sometimes. Yeah. I totally agree with that, man. I'm just like, what? Yes, you know. Ended up like in the midst of all this, like, you know, really really deep orchestration and in-depth lyricism. Like, I can still find those moments where I'm on my feet and I'm banging my head, you know what I mean? And, you know, and I'm old school thrash kid. I want to bang my head. That's what I want to do, you know? And
you've seen it.
You know, yeah, you've seen it many times. Unfortunately, sometimes when the shirts come off.
The shirt comes off sometimes too. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's usually around a fire.
There has to be a fire. Yeah. There has to be fire. There has to be bolt thrower. Yeah. But yeah, man. So I wouldn't change anything about the, you know, the orchestration, because, you know, it taps everything that I love about metal. You know, it's got the great guitars, it's got, you know, the scariness, you know, the darkness, the power. But additionally, I think the production of this album, what it does for me, and definitely in conjunction with everything, the layout, the cover, you know, the concept that was chosen, it's sincere. You know, there's a sincerity that comes from it, you know, and, you know, just like this kind of same kind of mystique and sincerity that came along with, you know, the Norwegian scene, for better, for worse, their actions, like, whatever, that darkness there, it's real, you know what I mean? And when I listen to Ruins, like, the darkness is very real. So I absolutely, you know, wouldn't change anything about the production. I definitely love it. And, you know, because, you know, the way that, you know, Blood Vaults, like, you know, and kind of enraptures me when I listen to it, especially when with headphones. Like, if there was any sort of changes to it, it would take away the magic from me. So I think it's great. And if he was to put out an album with the same sort of like mix again, I'd be happy with it, you know, not with the same songs, but in terms of, like, you know, the balance of the music, of the instruments, I think it's right on.
Okay, Kellen, production.
Yeah, I echo all of Jim's sentiments here. Just actually the other thing I would like to add is maybe headphones, but if I had an experience to hear this inside of, like, with an incredible system, you know, in a large sort of whatever, a church or something like that, just because the scale of this record, I guess, is the thing that stands out, is just the enormity of it. And I completely agree. The mix is great. Like, I don't have to make any compromises anywhere on this record. I hear everything with where it should be. Yep. Nothing is sort of veiled or overbearing. So mix is perfect. And it probably goes along with, I wonder how much he had say in terms of the actual, like, mixing and mastering of it when they came to do the production. But the one thing that really stood out for me is just, you know, I feel like, you know, I need a larger room for this record, I guess, is the thing that stood around, is like, just the absolute sort of width and size of this production, it just feels enormous. And through the entire record, I felt it was deserving. Like, I think Jack was talking about when the church organ, like, comes in there, to hear that, like, echo in a massive room, like, that's the setting for this. It's not my little living room, you know, it's a much larger sort of venue that is deserving of this record. So I have no complaints. Yeah, I've really an amazingly well produced record, given the nature of the songwriting.
Yep, I'm with you guys as well. I will say that I listened to this album. It's so dense and full and big it just, and you read the lyrics, it's not really condemning or supporting the content. It's just kind of stating it kind of as it is. And it's up to the music. The music itself creates a feeling of hell and torment that book and that guy put so many people through. I just thought that was a very clever, whether that was conscious or not. It just struck me as the music is what's telling me that is evil, not necessarily the lyrics. I mean, although there are some twisted, fucked up shit in there for sure, but it's kind of just a retelling what's in the book.
Semen.
Yeah, yes. That, I mean, it's just the music is telling me that this is coming from a bad. It was probably meant, to be on the right side of religion, but it ended up being a very bad, evil thing. And being able to hear every single element from the choir to, the drums are mixed well, the vocals sit where they need to be, and the organ, man, when the organs come in, I don't know what he did, if he pitched them down or if he added effects to them. I don't know. They're just so fucking malevolent sounding. It's just like these organs are just creaking out of hell. It's so good. I just love the feeling that this album gives, and it's unsettling. It's atypical. It's just very well considered, and the production is part of that. And I too would not change a thing. I wouldn't change a thing. Everything can be heard. It's full. It's heavy. It's dark. It's endlessly atmospheric. It's just a malevolent sounding album. But least favorite songs, Jim.
I refuse to say least favorite songs. Won't do it. Because I think that this album, it only works as a whole. It only works from beginning to end. This isn't hey, I love thrash. You guys know it. I talk about it all the time. But I can fast forward to certain Nuclear Assault songs. When I'm listening to a record, though I usually don't do that either. But on this, I absolutely have to listen to it from beginning to end every time. This isn't this like, oh man, I really love track 3 and now I'm done. This record isn't that kind of record for me. I absolutely have. I can't recall ever listening to this album not listening to it back to front. This is just, it's just got that kind of a hold on me, and so there is no least favorite. But I guess I will tell you, I guess maybe if I had to pick a favorite though, if I had to take an element of the album and say, all right, this is, the one that like really kind of takes me somewhere else. I don't know. It's a tie between Damon and Malefica. But both of those are just so intense. I guess it would have to be Damon, because man, when that thing comes in, man, it's just you're like, oh my God, where am I going? You really you feel like you're falling down a well into hell. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like you can feel the evil just coming at you, and it just keeps coming. So yeah, I've got down here, just raging vocal, the doomy riff when it finally comes in, the killer organs with it, Alexander goes from that really dark, deep voice, that creepy voice, into a shriek, and it's like I get goosebumps, when it starts getting near the song, he starts going crazy. He's like, ah! And I'm like, holy shit, man. It really does that to me, I wrote down here, yeah, my eyes roll into the back of my head, like that's what that song does to me. And also, it's really hard for me to, a song has to be really good to do the fade out thing and be cool. Like a lot of times I'm like, give me to the next track. You know what I mean? With lesser bands, I'm like, get me to the next track. With this one, when Damon's fading out, like I'm following it into the ether, as it starts to diminish, like, the haunting vibe hasn't left me. So definitely, if you haven't checked this album out, I'm sure most people on this chat have, but or the stream have. But listen to the first two tracks. Apologia and Demon at least. And I think if you're going to get blood vaults, you'll get it. From that first 13, 14 minutes of the record. So,
Kellen.
So I will agree that I really don't have any least favorite tracks here. But I guess my experience with the record is, I guess, like how it plays out over the full length or the breadth of the experience is the first early tracks. To me, it's like I'm getting involved in the record. Like I'm falling into the sort of pace of it and the rhythm of it. When I feel it's at its peak is at its center. So the three tracks, so side B, I guess, for the first LP, Ornaments of Malice, Spires, The Wailing City, into side A of the second LP, A Failed Exorcism. So those three tracks right at the center of this record is when I am like completely immersed in the entire experience. They're longer tracks, the three of them. And it's just in terms of the length of this record, how I sort of feel the most involved. At that point, I feel I'm led there. I have this incredible sort of center of the record, and then it's sort of on its way out. That's how I experience it when I listen in its totality. And it's where I end up enjoying its most. I think those longer tracks, I'm no longer looking for when they begin and they end. I'm just completely immersed in those songs at that time period. And then I kind of, on the way out, I kind of know it's on its way. So I guess that's my favorite moment on Blood Vaults, is just the center of the record and getting completely consumed by those three songs.
For me, today was the first day I ever looked at the song titles on this record, because ultimately I don't care. It's one of those albums where I'm in for the journey and I start at the beginning. I want to finish. I will say the biggest dislike of this record is the fact that I bought it on record. I kind of wish I didn't, because having to stop and flip the record kind of breaks the spell a little bit. I would have, I think, rather had the CD. I mean, I've been listening to it on Spotify or on YouTube. It's just a much more cohesive, immersive experience to sit down and kind of be lost in the journey and hearing all these things thrown at you and being part of the, the torment. Like with this here, you have to stop and flip a record. It snaps you out of it. Oh, okay, I have to participate in the playing of this record now. And other than just being, hypnotized by it. I think the songs are perfectly placed. Some might be a little more denser, a little more energetic than others, but the whole thing together is what makes the whole journey such a reward. So it's like, to sit there and call, there was nothing bad on this record. Nothing stands out as a negative. I kind of like just being surprised by what's coming and having to sit down and plot out which songs I liked or which better than others. It didn't make any sense. I don't see this as that type of a record. It's just kind of it could have been one long track and it would have been perfect. It would have been perfect, but it's not, and it's had to be broke up for vinyl. And yeah, I mean, it's cool. It's an awesome piece, but I would rather have had the CD and just been lost in the shuffle for the whole thing instead of being drug out of it every, 2 songs. Do you guys think that's kind of do you get the same feeling with that, or are you less bothered?
For sure. I mean, I'm happy I own the record. I love the artwork. I want it on vinyl.
It's killer. Oh, it's killer. Yeah.
But to your point, like I have to also mention, Jim talked about like, you can't just kind of jump around on the record. No. The LP, I don't know about the one you have, Marty, but like the track listing isn't like a side A, side B. It's not well organized on my record. So like when I'm pulling them out and playing them, so I've made the mistake of starting on the wrong, and I know it's immediately the wrong place to begin. And I've had to like stop and flip it around or whatever. So it's one of those albums where I need to find the right spot to begin, or else I know I'm doing it wrong. sort of deal.
Is this the album where it was hard to figure out which side was which?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. I got this and they were pulled out of the jacket. And I'm like looking at the insert and I'm looking at the records. I'm like, I can't read the fucking text on there. And I'm just like, I don't know if I even got this in the right order. So I spent half the time spinning it, not knowing if it's in the right order. But
sure. No, I know
annoying.
I know the record well enough to know what it's supposed to, like, that crazy vocals begins this.
Well, I didn't know that when I first got it. I'm just like, what the fuck? Which is which?
And anyway, I think Jack did the entire initial sort of speaking part that began the comments here. But
he did, yeah.
Awesome.
He did.
But it's to your point, Marty. Like, it is. I have no problem getting this record on CD and playing it through, like this, just for that reason. That I enjoyed playing it through and streaming it this past week and getting when I didn't have to flip it, where I didn't have to think about it. I could just move from one moment to the next without that kind of, because I don't want it to break. And it's seamless. So I totally agree.
Okay. Judgment, final thoughts. Jim, I think we know where you're going with this.
yeah. I think it's I think it's one of the best albums come out in the last 15 years. I mean, it's everything that dark music should be, and that most people in our genre choice aspire to, but can't even come close to. There are so few bands out there that can achieve this level of evil, in their album without, adhering to, tropes that I love, but, they're tired, you know what I mean? Satan this, devil that, I love all the hellfire, bring it on. But when you do it in this sort of way, when you take this lyrical concept and you wrap it up in this like very, very singular vision that no one else has, that's I think where you're really, really capturing what evil sounds like, or should or could sound like. And so it's a 10 for me. There aren't very many albums from 2013 that I visit often, but all Ruins of Beverast get spins from me, but this one gets the most. So yeah, definitely love this one.
Right on. Kellen.
Yeah, absolute classic. I think we know going to this week, we were like, oh man, we're all gonna love this record. So
yeah, that's why I said, you sure you want to pick this one? We're all gonna like this one.
It's a classic. And I mean, I don't know, at this point, it's almost a decade old. So I don't, in terms of the time span, in terms of when it takes to really appreciate a record for its contribution, its longevity and importance. But for me, Phallus is Seaman of the Sheltered Elite, like that, and this record compete for my favorite Ruins record. And they're both amazing. Some of the best extreme metal records that have been released in the 21st century. This is a defining band of a generation, and I think completely, to our point, unique. Early on, to do a record that's kind of like a historical first-person study, right? Like it's a character study of this person in history, told from their perspective as they lose their insanity. Amazing record, amazing concept, classic.
Agreed. I mean, there's nothing about this album that rubs me the wrong way. Read all the religious stuff you want. I mean, the true evil lurks in man. That's where it's truly the scariest, and actual evil that you can see in history and witness in a person is way scarier than anything you can read in a book, for me. And this album was great. It's an absolute perfect snapshot of the feelings that book that he wrote a concept about inflicted upon people, and the thoughts that went behind it, the feelings of oppressing people, judging people, persecuting people. It's all It's the perfect audio snapshot of that time in history. 10 out of 10 record for me as well. Wouldn't change a thing about it. So that's it, I guess. Said a lot. It felt like it went really quickly. It felt like it was only a half hour long, but we got almost an hour. But it's my turn to pick. And before we do that, last week after the our episode with Kellen on Friday night, we hatched a plan on how to have the viewers. We want the viewers to pick a future album club title, but I was a bit tipsy at the end of it, and I don't remember much of what we determined on that. So we're going to reconvene, take notes, and next week announce how you can participate in this. You pick the what we cover. But until then, we'll get that sorted out and announce it next week. But until then, I decided to go on the absolute opposite end of the spectrum because I mentioned I was going to do that. And we're going to go with, I think this came out this year. Nope, came out last year, 2021. Ken Nardi's second solo album called Trauma. Ken Nardi is the vocalist and guitarist from the thrash band Anacrusis from St. Louis, Missouri, which were an absolute favorite of mine back in the day. And his solo stuff is also very reminiscent of the Anacrusis sound and style. And this is a 2 CD set out on Dive Bomb Records last year. CD1 is the new album. CD2, he redoes a handful of, I think there's 1 or 2 new songs, and then he redoes a handful of Anacrusis classics. So we're going to go with Ken Nardi, Trauma, Kennardi, for those of you that want to do homework for next week. Hopefully this doesn't hurt you guys too much. I enjoy this guy's musical output, and I thought this would be a good step away from the dark and polluted nightmares of Alexander. But anybody have anything to say in closing here before we jump ship?
I'm glad Jimmy's safe down. Your roof is still on.
I don't see any water coming in.
Yeah, made it through. No debris coming in the window. No palm fronds smacking me in the skull while I'm talking. So I'm good. I'm glad for it.
Palm fronds. 2 words I've never had to say together ever. Palm fronds.
Hey man, it's a thing, dude. They're fucking all over my yard right now. Everywhere. They're everywhere.
Right on. Everybody, again, Kellen's last video, he does part 1 deep dive on the Blue Dust Nord catalog. Part 2, will that be coming soon, Kellen?
Yep, the editing's on its way, making my way through that long video. But that's on its way here, and soon enough.
Now, that's another band we could have maybe mentioned along
another one-man band. Vinzval is really
been a one-man band and doing similar dark, twisted, incorporating different styles. Now that I mentioned that, that's actually that would have been a good one to bring up at the time. But anyway, everybody, thank you so much for joining us again. It's always fun, always a pleasure hanging out with these guys and talking some metal. But definitely check us out Friday. I am not going to be here Friday, so Alan has enlisted Middle Mickey and Darcy from Darcy 6 Strings 9 Lives, and they're going to be ranking the Megadeth catalog. I'm kind of sad I'm going to miss that, but I have to go to a show and support our audio engineers band. So that's going to be fun, and it's going to be fun to watch those guys. Tune in. Alan will be getting things set up soon. But until then, thank you, everybody, and insert cool catchphrase here, which we still don't have, and we will see you Friday, next Wednesday for sure. Cheers, everyone.